welcome to our last and final unit of the year, and this unit is ecology. And ecology is the branch of biology that studies organisms, their relationships to one another, and also their relationships to the environment. There are three branches of ecology, which we're going to spend about, 2 days on population ecology, 1 day on community ecology, and then maybe 2 days on ecosystem ecology, or 2 lessons on ecosystem ecology. So this lesson focuses on population ecology, and population ecology is the study of the individuals of a given species in a given area at a given time. So like, for example, you could study the population of feral cats in Hartford, Connecticut. But it's the study of just one species in a given space. Community ecology studies all the organisms that live in a place and how they interact with each other. So if you were still in this Hartford, Connecticut population we talked about with feral cats, community ecology, an example of something that you would study in community ecology, is how the humans and the cats interact in Hartford, Connecticut. But it's a study of all the organisms in a given area and how they interact and affect each other. Last but not least, we have ecosystem ecology. And ecosystem ecology is the study of all the living things in the environment and how they interact with the abiotic or non-living components of an ecosystem. This focuses a lot on how energy passes through ecosystems, and the role of sort of energy flow and how efficient energy flow is through the different levels of the ecosystem. You also see food webs and things like this in ecosystem ecology. So like I said, this video focuses on population ecology, and once again, population ecology is the study of all organisms of one species that live in a given space during a given time. And a population, once again, is how individuals of the same species, meaning they intermate with each other, how their population grows in the same area during the same period of time. So here we have a population of seals. How cute. The main question in population ecology is how or what factors affect the growth of the population. And that's the goal of population ecologists, is to affect or to study the factors that influence the size of populations. In many cases, in case of organisms that are endangered in given areas, you want to work to increase the population size. Also, in some cases, you also would like to work to decrease the population size. So in Hartford or in Connecticut in general, they want to allow the hunting of bear because there's been more bear sightings recently, and they feel like the bear population in Connecticut is growing out of control. Another example is deer. Deer have overpopulated areas, especially down south, and governments have developed measures to control the deer population. Every once in a while, you'll also have infestations of pests. When I was a kid, there was this infestation of something called gypsy moth caterpillars, and they were everywhere. In Long Island, mostly affected Long Island, the government enacted measures to control the growth and reproduction of these gypsy moth caterpillars. And one of the things they did is they actually sprayed chemicals that killed them. But again, the goal of population ecology is to understand the factors that affect the growth of population size, and then in some cases either manipulate them to increase the population size or manipulate them to decrease the population size. When we're looking at factors that affect population size, there are abiotic factors, which are non-living factors. Some examples of abiotic factors: we have sunlight, temperature, availability of water, soil and nutrients, and then we also have biotic factors or living factors or that affect the population size. This could be the availability of food, also known as prey, the competitors that are living in the environment, and also the presence of either predators that eat the organisms in the population, parasites that will feed off them, or the presence of disease. There are also intrinsic factors that control an organism's ability to either speed its growth or slow its growth. And a lot of that has to do with adaptations, or the ability of an organism to adapt to its environment or to adapt to changes in the environment. And again, often the ability of a population to adapt often has to do with the genetic variability in the population. The greater the genetic variability, the more likely that a population will be able to adapt to the changing conditions of an environment. When we describe a population, we look at three aspects of a population. The population's range, so how far the land is, and how far the land spaces out. The pattern of spacing, so sort of how densely packed the organisms live. Do they live spread out? Do they live close together? And then lastly, the size of the population. We're going to spend most of our time talking about factors that affect the size of the population, and just briefly touch on these two. There. We also, population ecologists also study endangered species, and often endangered species, or why species are considered endangered, is that they have a limited habitat that they can live in. And if that habitat changes or gets destroyed, that puts that species at risk because they cannot adapt to a new environment. So examples of this are like animals or species that live in the rainforest, and the destruction of the rainforest destroys their habitat, and since they're not adaptable to other habitats, you're placing that species at risk for extinction. So now looking at population size, or how population size is calculated. Population size is affected by four things that could occur in the population. Birth, obviously organisms being born. Death, organisms dying. And then immigration, organisms coming into the community. And then immigration, organisms leaving the community. On Wednesday, we're going to spend a lot of time. Wednesday's lesson is essentially how to use math to sort of predict population sizes in the future. But in general, if you add the births and the immigration, and then subtract, and this needs to be in parentheses, and then subtract the deaths minus the immigration, you'll know how much the population changed in a given year. I'm sorry, not minus, plus. You'll know how much the population changed in a given year. This is who is either being born or coming into the population, and this is either who's dying or entering the population. So if you have a negative number here, obviously your population size is decreasing. If you have a positive number, that means your population size is increasing. We are going to look much more great detail at the math on this in Wednesday's lesson. So if we look overall at factors that affect the growth rate of the population, there are some internal factors that affect how fast a population can grow. One is the sex ratio, how many males versus how many females. If you have a low amount of females in your population, the growth rate of the population is limited because it's the females that rear young. And if there's only 2 females at the population, your population growth can only be as fast as how many babies those 2 females can have in a year. So generally, populations that have low amounts of females have lower growth rates than those that have large amounts of females. Another thing that affects an internal thing that affects growth rates is generation time, or at what age do females reproduce. Females that are reproduce early, or able to reproduce early, or have longer reproductive periods will have a faster growth. Female cats, they can start reproducing almost at the age of 1. Whereas, in the human population, we have females, the earliest they usually can reproduce is around 12. So the earlier reproduction is possible, the faster the growth rate the population will be. Lastly, we have the age structure. At a given time, you may have a different number of females in a population that are at reproductive age. The more females that are at reproductive age, the faster the population can grow. So for example, if we take humans, the reproductive age for humans is about, at a low level, not every female, but 12 around, to probably around the 40s. Okay? A population that has more females within that, that range between 12 and about 40, they'll have a faster growth rate. Possible growth rate if there are more females at reproductive age compared to older populations that have less females at reproductive age. They won't be able to grow as fast.